Steve Moran here with Foresight TV. I apologize for being a little bit late. It seems like we have been fighting a lot of technology gremlins the last couple of weeks. I'm going to blame it on platforms like StreamYard and email and stuff, although I'm going to confess it might be user error. Today, we are talking to one of my favorite leaders in all of senior living, Sean Kelly with Kendal. But before we get started, this. Hey guys, Steve Moran here. Sean, welcome. Thank you for joining us.
You betcha. And yeah, I'll sign up to the user error for sure, Steve. I'm not one that tends to cast blame. I'm pretty sure at the end of the day, if something was going wrong, I had something to do with it. So.
Well, it may be some, but I will tell you, sometimes these things just don't work right. I'm pretty good at this. And last week when I was doing it on Friday, I don't even know what the failure was, and I was panicking. And so I think it was a system error, but it might have been me. I couldn't get the camera to work or something. So anyway, let's start talking a little bit about who you are, your organization, and what you're passionate about. And then I do want to dig into that email that you sent me this morning because it really touched my heart as well.
Okay, happy to. Yeah, it's top of mind for sure. Well, Steve, thanks for having me. It's good to see you, close in like this. My name is Sean Kelly. I'm president and CEO of the Kendal Corporation. I think I have to stop saying my new job started in 2017 because it's been 5 years since I've taken on this role. I've been at Kendal since 2008. I've been in the sector since about 1997, and I have a devotion to it that only grows each day. And some of the reasons that I see it growing have a little bit to do with that little essay that I sent you. It really has to do with appreciation for people. I was really lucky to have been brought into this sector by a couple of gentlemen, one of whom his name was Avery Rockefeller, who first introduced me to the whole idea of getting things done well really requires all of us to be present with one another, to engage, to listen. And not until you can do those things do you get to figure out what might want to happen next. And I think about that, and then I equate it to how I think about getting older. And through that engagement and listening and then figuring it out, there's a lot to be said for appreciating just where we all each are along this journey, and especially if you're along this journey and seeing yourself or the people that you care about, or even just the people that are in your sphere getting older, you can't look away from the realities, the realities that include loss, the realities that include decline, the realities that include confusion and falls like my mom had last week. And once you can get comfortable embracing those realities, I think we also need to work a lot harder to expect, understand, and fall in love with the notion that there are also real possibilities that come along with getting older too. And that sort of paradox is something that I think we have a hard time getting our arms around as a culture, as a society. But when it's done, there's inspiration all around us.
Yeah, what's so fascinating to me, I'm almost schizophrenic about the ageism, the conversation about ageism. First off, I think it's a real problem. I think it's a real problem in senior living. I see a lot of residents being treated in very patronizing ways. But I also see anti-aging activists getting upset when people make jokes about growing older and the declines that take place. I'm 67 years old. I'm very fortunate. I have good genes. I would attribute it more some lifestyle, but mostly good genes. And at most conferences or out hiking, I can outlast people who are 10, 15, 20 years younger than I am.
Yep.
And I was at the Florida Leading Age last. I don't know whether I don't know if this is to my credit or detriment. I'm not quite sure. But I was out to dinner and some activities afterwards, and I didn't get back to my hotel room until like 1:00 in the morning one night. And those of you who see me at conferences know that's not all that unusual. And but that being said, there are things that I can't do today because I'm older that I could do 10 or 20 years ago. And I probably couldn't stay out until 1:00 at night for 5 nights in a row, which I might have been able to do when I was in my 20s or 30s or even 40s. Right. And so I don't know how you reconcile that.
Well, I think it starts by appreciating it, sort of accepting that, and then trying to understand what those specific impacts are on you, and particularly how those changes are impacting what you want to do. So guess what? You might want to stay out till 1:00 in the morning, and you may want to, build yourself up to be able to do that from time to time.
That's right.
You also don't want to walk in a fantasy land that suggests that you can do it all the time. I mean, it's not surprising, Steve, to hear how awesome your specific genes are, but you also know that in the main, the things that really drive, people's, how old they get and how well they are over a long course of time, it has a lot more to do with behavior and environment than it does with your genes. And it all matters, but the amount of influence that we have over what is possible for ourselves and even the people that we care about is pretty significant, so long as we're, in my opinion, willing to take stock of where we are at the time. And I see in my parents a much higher degree, and we know the research in the markets indicates a much higher degree of willingness to kind of play in that uncomfortable space, which causes you to kind of have to admit to the hard parts that come along with getting older. But once you do that, and a lot of people move into community. I was just on the phone with someone who has on the top of his mind a plan to make a move. And it's too few people that are planning forward in this way, but his plan to make a move is in large part driven by his acceptance and celebration of his reality and the reality that he hopes for when he expects to need, different things in different ways to do the stuff that's really important to him.
Yeah. Well, on Monday, I went down to Florida early because I had a mission, and that was to go visit the Margaritaville Latitudes, the plus 55 community. And it was a fascinating experience. And these are people who have seen this lifestyle. They say that's the lifestyle I want. And so when they opened it up and started talking about it, they had 40,000 people who sent in inquiries. A couple of other things, I'm going to write about this, but a couple of other things are that the average age is 4 years younger than I am right now. And that if I wanted to move in, if I walked in with my checkbook, and I'm not sure it's the place I'd want to live, I'll be frank about that. But if I walked in, it'd be at least 2 years before they'd have a house ready for me. And I think there's a lesson for us that we can create things, and that there are people who are actually thinking about this and saying, I want a lifestyle. And maybe they couldn't have even envisioned that, but we can, once it was put out there, it's like, oh yeah, I want to embrace that. And so can we do that? Well, you're sort of working on a project like that, right?
I mean, I think there's room for latitudes and longitudes and all of the things in between. Right. Honestly, I think when I think about, the phenomenon that is latitudes, I think of, obviously a 50-year career by Jimmy Buffett and the culture that he sort of, stands for, if you will, is easy to understand, right? It's in shorthand. Margaritaville is like, okay, I get it. And I think I draw a correlation between, the experience of 40,000 people signing up and expressing interest in latitude straight away with our experiences at several Kendals, but in particular at Enso Village out in California. And they're very different places, right? We have a Zen-inspired community that is being developed as an Ultimate Kendal affiliate that will open up next summer. And we had people that were signing up before we even opened up an interest list. But what they were signing up for was to learn more about what we were expressing as a vision for what this place might be, right? And over time, the expression of that vision became more and more clear and became more and more authentic, because it was a story that was being driven by or created by, yes, the folks that had this bright idea in the beginning, but moreover, the people that were, giving more life to it as they were thinking about what might they do in this place, in this new Zen inspired community. Latitudes, straight away, you don't have to look too far to at least get a sense for what is intended there, for what they stand for the lifestyle that's available to you. So I think we do some of our best work, not when we're trying to necessarily change what we have, but actually speak to what we have in ways that people can begin to get an appreciation for what it might be like once they come, and furthermore, how much impact they might have on how that community ultimately manifests, how it feels to live in this place with friends and others over, if for Kramer were here, he'd say over the last 8,000 to 9,000 days of your life.
Yeah. So you're touching the thing that probably drives me crazy more than anything else in senior living, and that's that we're so terrible at storytelling, and we're not telling the stories about lives, families that are changed. I can't say who it is yet because we haven't come to a final agreement, but I've been invited to come spend a week at a campus and just work on collecting and propagating stories to grow the culture for both the team and the residents. And and they want to do it right away. So I'm really, really excited about this because I think that the way we attract more people, residents, if we're looking at it that side, I think the way we attract more team members is to be telling the stories that are actually mostly are already there. I mean, we don't have to go out and invent them out of whole cloth. And so I'm pumped up about this opportunity to do this.
Hey, Steve, you know what else? Amen. And it's funny, I just got some notes. We just published our annual report for 2021, and the last couple of years we're exclusively focused on, telling the stories of things that are going on at our operating affiliates and beyond. And not only do we want to become better, listen, we all learn in different ways. I like to tell stories, and I like to hear stories, and I retain a lot better. And if I'm hearing stories, the other thing I think is important for us to consider is, we don't always need intermediaries to tell stories. We have some great, good people that are doing the work, that are on the ground, that are changing people's lives. We have some great, good people that are forming these communities and having an impact on the world around them while they're living in community or while they're availing themselves of services that are provided by senior living providers all around the country. I want to hear from them. And, we're working on a project right now with Joe Coughlin and Vicki Shepard and a handful of others where we intend to really explore, how we might optimize the business models that sort of underpin our sector. And before we do that, though, we also recognize that we've got to do a way better job of bringing awareness to and bringing light to this idea that we are among heroes when we walk into any one of these communities. If that is true, and I believe that it is, we've got to get the word out in a different way than we ever have. And a part of that is to learn from the people that are doing the work, who are being called heroes, what matters most to them, what brings them and keeps them where they are. And if they're not there, what do we need? How do we need to be thinking differently about this work, what this work might be? And, I love talking about it. I try to listen carefully and try to bring forward what I notice, from others. And when I kind of see things that are, I think, noteworthy, I try to speak to it and shine light on it. But the better work is done when we hear right from the horse's mouth what matters. How do we make something better? How do we instigate change?
Yeah, and I think one of the big challenges I see from the C-suite, I don't think you're probably afflicted with this, but I see too many instances where there are leaders who say, "Oh yeah, I'm listening," and they put the time in to listen, but it's just like it goes in one ear out the other, and there's never anything comes out. They don't learn anything from listening. They're doing it out of obligation, not out of saying, "Oh man, I want to hear the story." So, I think you can go into a resident council meeting and think it is just a place where you're going to go beat up, or you can go into a resident council meeting and say, "Man, I can hardly wait to get this long list of complaints because those are opportunities for me to get better." Yeah. And so, how do you as a C-suite person sort of get past already having all the answers?
Yeah, it's kind of easy for me because I'm just trying to get along.
Yeah.
I was asked a while back what do I think one of my greatest attributes as a leader might be? And I'm pretty sure I said something like, I am very cool with not being right. I love to think out loud. I love to learn, from the room and from beyond the room. And I'm very comfortable saying, holy Hannah, that was not the bright idea that I thought it might be. Let's make it different. Let's allow ourselves to move differently. But when I think about, kind of speaking to what you just said, Steve, around I'm listening, right? For me personally, and I think this, I'm very lucky to be at Kendal because there is a nice, I have an incredible affinity for, the Quaker history and the values that go along with it that underpin Kendal, and it speaks to this. So the idea, especially, when you want to be building community and when you have the responsibility of leading communities, or a community of people as an executive director or CEO or anybody that happens to work in this space, we know that our marketplace is not just wanting, but more and more demanding to be heard, demanding to feel, not just feel a part of this bigger thing that they are joining in on, but to indeed be a part of it. So when I talk out loud, if somebody asks about kind of what does it take, I think we owe each other two things. We owe each other, we owe each other, we have the responsibility to hear and be heard, right? So that means I'm listening, but a part of the proof in my listening is that I may have something to respond as a result of what I might have learned from you. Right. So that's one way to put it. But another way, and this is where it gets into values for me, viscerally, I want to hear, and I don't want you just to feel heard, Steve. I want to hear you because I have an absolute belief that what you have to say will teach me and us something that we otherwise might not have discovered if we were on our own. And I believe that. I'm convinced of that. And so it becomes a little bit easy for me. And I think if you can get to that space, if you can really appreciate the value that can come from connection and collaboration and real engagement, this business of hearing and listening, if you will, it comes off a little bit more easily and certainly becomes a hell of a lot more effective. And guess what? Our marketplace, they pick up on nonsense. They pick up on BS real fast. So if you think you're in a room saying that you're listening and sort of nodding away and then not coming off in a way that suggests that you've internalized and really considered what it is that's been put before you, things are not going to work out as well as they might.
Yeah. I every time, one of the things that I love about going to conferences, I mean, I love there's like nothing I don't like about conferences, right? Except maybe that they're not long enough and I can't have enough conversations, but I always come away with insights that I wouldn't have gotten. And the best insights are almost always in one-on-one or small group conversations. So I knew this was going to happen. I knew we'd have not enough time for all the stuff I want to chat with you about. I've got three things I want to touch bases on. Leanne, who's part of our team, said, is in the 40s. I've gained some, a lot older. And that's the one thing I just wanted to say, is that, I've talked about the things that I can't do anymore, but there are also so many. I couldn't be doing what I'm doing today. I couldn't have probably done this even in my 50s. And so
right.
the age and the wisdom and the skills that have come along have huge value. But I want to get to your mom's story. I'd like to have you tell that story. And I don't know if there's a way we can do it. It's not quite probably clean enough to put out. I would love to make that available, or maybe if you'd allow me to publish that. I think it is beautiful. So
I'll talk to my communications colleagues, but I don't, I'll on occasion, and I try to do it routinely when things, when things occur to me, I try to speak to them in a way that I did there. And, thanks for asking. And there are implications to that story that I think cut across ageism and, how our health system operates and so forth that I won't get into. But I'll just tell the simple, it's kind of what I found to be the inspirational story that associates with my mom. So I'll take off and tell it, and you're welcome. I'll get back to you.
Tell the story, and then let's chat. Yeah. I'd like to chat a little bit about it. It was profound to me.
My mom's 78 years old. She is more typical to the kinds of folks that I might run into that live independently across Kendal and other organizations. She's got if I were a clinician, I would say her baseline is super, super high for, very active, very socially engaged, very busy, very aware, very, very independent. And she's a great grandmother. She lives her life to its fullest on her terms, and is a fascinating woman to be around. And I'm old enough now to have gotten over the craziness that I think she, foisted upon me when I was an adolescent. But anyway, I got a crazy phone call last Tuesday afternoon from my daughter, my oldest daughter. And what she said was, "Dad, your mom's in the hospital, or on her way to the hospital right now. She took a terrible fall at the pool." So what happened was, my mom was walking into the pool from the parking lot, having just played a game of Mahjong, and she tripped up a curb wearing flip-flops, which is another matter to discuss after all this is said and done. Tripped up a curb and had a devastating fall, to the point where her arm was broken in 5 places, and she had to endure a 5-hour surgery, a separated shoulder, a broken nose, lacerations and scrapes all over her face. Both, she has an artificial knee and a regular knee. One is torn up and required 50 stitches. The other one is sprained to the point where she's not mobile. And because of the nature of the hit and the concern about head trauma, she had to go to the closest trauma center, which happens to be about 15 minutes from where I was sitting when I got this call. So I get over to the trauma center, and I have the usual experience with a hospital system that is wonderful, yet absolutely not built to serve a person. Right? It's built to address conditions and symptoms, and to apply amazing, wonderful care to those symptoms and conditions, but not necessarily to recognize, which is another discussion that's worth having. So I go in, can't get in the place because of COVID and because of other kinds of restrictions, and they don't have a bed for her in the trauma unit yet, and so on and so forth. Over some course of time, mostly with the help of some of the most, you want to talk about heroes, the security personnel at these locations, in these trauma centers, in these, urban areas, especially where there's just an incredible amount of density. They're not just doing security. They're doing population health management. They're doing social work. They are psychologists. They are friends. They are family even. I couldn't believe the amount of work over the course of a couple of days that I witnessed these men and women do, that were security officers at the trauma center in the hospital. Anyway, I get back there, still first day. She's in and out of lucidity. She does not yet on pain meds, et cetera, well into that first night where things are at least calming down. We'd had a couple of consults with all the various doctors and so forth that needed to see her. As a result of this, my mom wakes, and, I'm still sitting there, and she offers to me, some concern over the fact that she's not going to be able to pull off her vacation that was supposed to begin this week. At the beach, where she was going to be into all sorts of stuff with my kids, my brother's kids, and her friends, and other parts of the family, and so on. It's her lifeblood every year to do this for about a month. And she's distraught, but she is in some kind of pain. And my heart hurts just remembering it. But anyway, she goes into this conversation and is getting a little bit melancholy, but can barely even talk through, the scrapes and bruises and upset that she's had. And she kind of wanders off a little bit, but then she comes back in, almost as if she was having this conversation with herself in the quiet. She comes back a little bit later into this discussion. It's the middle of the night. It's dark. It's still the trauma center at the Cooper Hospital here in Camden, New Jersey. And she kind of eyeballs me, and she's like, "You know what, Sean? I'm done." And I'm paraphrasing. I'm done worrying about the stuff that I'm not going to be able to do, that I'm not doing next week. I can't have time for it. I've got to figure out what it is that I will do once I get the hell out of here. And I was just like, in that moment, like, to be in that kind of a condition, to have that sort of foresight and the courage to kind of look into what might be next without avoiding, what's right in front of her. I was just blown away. I was blown away. She said what I would only hope to say and feel. And oh, by the way, today she was able to get an acute rehab referral at an amazing place, and is coming home later today with care and all that other jazz. But she's been on this, 10-day journey through the trauma center to the hospital to an acute rehab center and now home. And I'll tell you, a huge part of why is because of her focus on what may be, not what won't be or can't be.
So how do we show? I mean, I think that's largely how I've lived my life.
Hmm.
And I'm not skiing anymore because I'm taking blood thinners, and I drive by and a ski hill, whether there's snow or it's summertime, and I think about all the turns I made down there, and I have a little bit of regret. And then I think, I'm still out there. When I die, which is going to happen to all of us, am I going to want my obituary to be about skiing one more hill or about changing one more life? And, everybody's got to make that decision. I'm not being judgmental, but I have to tell you, for me, if I took one less turn on the hill than I maybe would have wanted personally, if I changed one more life, that's a huge trade-off for me.
Yeah.
And I hear your mom saying, yeah, there's, and each day we pass, there's stuff, we make these decisions, and being willing to acknowledge that you can't do everything, then it helps you see the possibilities. And so how do we as senior, to me, that's the dream for senior living, is if we can take somebody, even if it's, even if they're moving into a nursing home on a hospice, and say to them, what is it that will give you the most power, the most meaning? What are the things you can still do? I mean, we could change the world. We could have more people in our buildings than with a line of people standing there waiting to get in.
Well, I know it's funny. I was just talking about this with some other colleagues on a whole other matter the other day. There is now plenty of research, and Mark Cohn from the LTSS Center of Leading Age up at UMass in Boston, it kind of has done a bunch of research and is aware of even more research that talks about people stages of engagement that lead to activation, and that activation is the difference between engagement and activation is, not surprisingly, is this inducement to movement, right? It's not just pontification, it's movement, it's making something happen, whatever that might be. A part of the bridge between the necessary engagement and awareness and education that happens to that activation has a whole lot to do with the subject matter that is before the person. If you're able to get into a discussion around what really is important to someone, is it skiing? Is it impacting somebody else's life? Is it having a podcast? Is it having a TV show? Is it owning a newspaper? Is it serving others? Is it teaching English as a second language, as so many Kendal residents have done at Kendal Crossings in Pennsylvania for so many years? If you can tie into those things that matter to you, you are far more likely to engage in the programming of how it is that I can make those things happen. And then when you make those things happen, we also know that the outcomes in terms of your own personal quality of life and how you access and use the health system over a long period of time, they change too. So we spend a lot of time across Kendal, and it's been in Kendal's DNA since way before I ever got here. I am so honored to be in a place that has always been so considerate of every person's of every person's wishes. We don't just say that we're paying attention to people. We don't just hear people. Our expectation is that we honor every person. And part of honoring a person is to ask them what the heck is important to them. And then once you know that, then you can have a bigger discussion around, well, how might that be? And how do we get there from here? Do you want to get there from here? And I think there's a mainstream. Number one, so the research supports it. Number two, the baby boomers, if I can use that term, are far more inclined to play in that space than what we had seen in previous generations. And number three, there's an increased mainstreaming effect of this, what I'll call person-centered approach to engagement and life. I mean, Atul Gawande, in his book Being Mortal, spent a lot of time around end-of-life matters and how improved they are. Hospice in particular, I think, continues to experience an incredible evolution in large part of Dr. Gwande's work, which really zeroes in on the whole person, where they are in that moment, not who they might have been, not what they might have done, who are you right now and what might be next. And I think I know there are a lot more folks that are more inclined to engage in that space than we had seen before. But I also think it's incumbent upon people like you and other, leading voices, thinkers, and doers in our sector to be clear about the reality of this paradox. The paradox that is, yeah, there's decline. Yeah, I can't do it the same way or do the same stuff the way that I used to. But damn it, there's also the possibility for what may be. Our curiosity never wanes. So how do we fulfill what might be next by at least engaging in the possibility of asking something that comes from asking somebody, well, what do you think, or what do you want to do, or what's important to you?
That's right. And I think about my dad who passed away just a couple of months ago. And, he passed away on a Monday. I was with him on a Saturday afternoon, and he seemed to be fine, fine, relatively speaking, for a 93-year-old. But, he was still reading books, and we were talking about politics and life and all those kinds of things. And he was living his life until 24 hours when his body just started shutting down. And it's a beautiful model. And so the question is, I just killed my camera, and
Do you get a lot smaller?
Hang on a second. See, like I say, it's just stuff, right?
So while you're fixing that, I'll just say, like, with respect to this, how you describe, your dad, which, and there's been a lot of writing and research, the desire to kind of live long and die fast, if you will. And it sounds so crass, but what you described to me is a beautiful journey, even in the finishing days, if you will. And I think there's so much to be said for being able to kind of play in space where you can have real conversations. And in order to do that, and this gets back into, and I have this feeling that, the experience that your dad may have been in part driven by how you engaged with him as a person, as a whole person, not my dad, not an old man, not someone that is in need, not someone who I have to figure out how I can help, but how are you, sir? And I think there's an element, and this is part of what's driving a lot of intergenerational ideas. It's driving a lot of what happens with communities and organizations that want to have deeper partnerships with colleges and universities. The idea of meeting people where they are in ways that are not unaware of, but agnostic as to age and place and color and so many other things. Those are aspirations. We have so long to go in every arena, but at least to understand that there's an impact that can come from making the effort to meet folks as they are and where they are and experience the whole person. I was reading something recently that somebody put in front of me that actually was asking me, that was reflecting on something I had said about how I grew up. I grew up around older people in my grandparents' house in a way that was somewhat unique. And I've always had this very comfortable way with people of older people, to be sure. And what I noticed as I've gotten older, and especially as I continue to work in this space, is that at our best, when you walk into a room with a bunch of people, they're not residents, they're not members, they're not staff, they're people. And I think the movement that can come from that kind of a consideration is really, really important. And oh, by the way, if we don't get that right, we're going to be out of business. So that's a whole other element. It feels really good when it happens, but it is also what is required in order to meet the market in the ways that the market is clearly evidencing that it has demands.
Well, and I think that I absolutely agree with that. And I think we're probably the only media outlet that actually has two people who are part of our team who actually live in senior living. And they bring such a rich perspective that we couldn't otherwise have. Yeah. And they talk about the good things and the not so good things. And it's just really, really exciting. We are so heading out of time here, and we haven't even hardly talked about Enso Village. So I'm thinking maybe we'll have to do that another time. But why don't you give us at least 30 seconds on that? So you made mention of it. And one more thing before I get to that is I don't know whether you can see the comments, but some wonderful comments about the story you told your mom. And so I'll send you a link. So if you can't see them, I'll send you a link so you can see them online afterwards. But I want you to enjoy that. So
thank you. Yeah, very much. So, Enso, super quick, kind of groundbreaking, the first Zen inspired community. It was similar to Margaritaville, but on a completely different scale. It got all kinds of attention. It was an incredible success. It was pre-sold at a rate that nobody had ever seen before. We financed it at rates that nobody had ever seen before, and it's under construction. And and on time and on budget so far, even in this crazy world in Healdsburg, and scheduled to open next summer. Rosemary Jordan, the CEO at Enso Village, actually started on Monday, and I think she'd be a fascinating person for folks to get a hold of. I'll say this about Enso Village: the community is building itself before the community is actually built out of the ground, and it's a phenomenon that I'm very familiar with around Kendal. But what people that are kind of looking in on Enso Village are saying is, "Holy, how do these people? How are they engaging so quickly and so well in building this community?" Well, some of it's aided by this kind of medium. So we've definitely leveraged up the benefits that come from being able to be connected in so many different ways that we learned on through COVID. But it's also the expressed intention of Enso Village to become this Zen-inspired community, a part of the Kendal system, in ways that the community itself will define. So I think we have something like 2 or 3 dozen already operating kind of cultural and working groups, advocacy groups, action committees, and so forth that are already at work. There's intentional design around how we approach the marketplace that helps that for sure, but we're also not getting in the way of the self-starters that want to help us, fulfill the intentions of this community in partnership with us. We need them, and they're fully at work. The last thing I'll say: people that have looked at it said, "Oh my God, it's the next new thing. It's Enso Village. It's Zen inspired. How do we find out more, and how do we do this again somewhere?" And I say, yeah, it is new, and it's brand, and it's just coming out of the ground. But the essence of it is a retreat back to originating values. It's a retreat back to asking people what matters to them. It's a retreat back to hearing and being heard. It's a retreat back to the importance of community and connection and engagement, and a desire to have impact beyond just yourself. That's what that is. It's brand new, and it comes from the exact place that we started from, at least from Kendal's perspective.
So what I love about this, and I mean, it's in some sense, it's like it's the opposite of Margaritaville, but honestly, it's the same approach. So the Margaritaville folks, when they went out there, they had 40,000 people. And so they went to these 40,000 people and they said, "What do you guys want? What's important?" And so they didn't just take their idea of what Margaritaville should be. They actually asked the customer, and then that's what they built. And
there's a trick to that too, though, Steve, I think, because like Margaritaville, I agree, there is a framework and there is a vision.
That's right.
Right. That begins the discussion. Right. So we don't come at this completely with a clean slate. We do express expectations and a really strong sense of what this may be that is driven by the intent to ask and listen to the answers to those questions. But and I think that's why I have some excitement for our field, because I think the more that we can do that, it's not one thing, right? It's not Enso Village or Margaritaville, but it's the 100 different things that we need to express into the marketplace so the market can understand their own possibility and then self-select into the place that makes the most sense for them individually.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, there might be 1,000 different frameworks that we could, wouldn't it be fun to take a bunch of really smart thinkers and spend a day doing nothing but just making a list of 100 or 1,000 or whatever we could come up with different framework. Because you look at Margaritaville, you look at Enso Village, in some sense, even the villages in Florida would be a model that's probably closer to Margaritaville. You look at what Paria Living is doing, where they're very specific for folks who are Indian, where they want that family culture, and there are of course, we've seen this with religious communities probably longer than further out than anything else. But they're probably, there are probably hundreds, if not thousands, of these frameworks that we could come up with. And it would be really fascinating to spend a day working on it, or half a day.
And that's combat against ageism right there, by the way, because the old assumption is there used to be 2 frameworks. If you're older, there are 2, 3. One is to stay wherever the heck you are. The other one is a pure hospitality model, as it's been described, or the country club model, as some folks have called it, or the cruise ship model. And the other was called the engaged model, right? The place where you're heard. And that is way too simple when we're talking about whole people, So, amen to that. There are thousands, if not thousands, of frameworks, and I think it smells like opportunity for us, but it also smells like we need to continue to reflect back on, again, what got us here. And it's about human connection and community at once. And then from there, we discover what it really could look like, depending on the folks that we hope to serve.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I mean, this we've operated under this model that if you're all old, you're all going to get along. And I don't think old conservatives and old liberals are going to get along any better because they're over 70 or over 80 or over 90 than they did when they were 30 and 40. So,
Mhm.
Sean, thank you very much. It's been an amazing conversation. We're way behind. Hold on for just a second after we are done here, and I've got to change.
Thank you, Steve, very much.
And so with that, we are out of here.